We're really excited to be here. This is about 2 years in the making. Pat and I have always wanted to be a part of an event where we bring the industry leaders together and we talk about all the things that are really important to us, but in a setting that's controlled, that allows us to focus, and we don't have to rush off to somewhere else. And then we can have these things recorded and given to you so you can have the resources to make your businesses better. So we're really excited to be here today. I'm really excited to we have a star-studded cast of panelists. We've got industry leaders from all over the place, from installs and sales to analytics and finance and everything else in between. So we're really excited to do this. Pat, is there anything you want to add to that?
No, it's peak season for you guys. We know you're busy. I feel like when you go to a lot of other conferences or events, you might not get as good of content as you could get on this today. So that's really what we're focused on is quality of content. This isn't maybe a networking event like you guys go and fly out to, but hopefully just a way for us to give back and give you guys some tools to finish out the season strong.
Sweet. We're going to hand it off to Brent for some housekeeping and let's rock and roll.
Let's do it. And let's remind everybody, we do have 10 information pack sessions over the next 2 days, 10. So this is number one. And so there's so much more to come. A few housekeeping items are that all of the sessions will be recorded and we will share those after the event. You're all muted by default. And while we don't have time for in-depth QA, you can still feel free to drop questions in the Q&A field that you can see at the bottom of your screen. And we'll do our best to answer them along the way, but we might not be able to get to all of them. And you can return to the event lobby at any time today or tomorrow and join sessions from there. So you'll see those all available to you inside that link that you all have. So a couple of quick intros, and then we're going to launch a poll, and then Pat's going to take it from here. So first, today we're joined by Chris Collins, founder of Ohm Analytics. We've got Phil Shen, senior research analyst at Roth Capital. And we've got our co-founder, Pat Bennett, and Spencer too. So we're really excited to have all of you on. Thank you for joining. Let's launch that poll. And okay, this just tells us a little bit more about everybody. Take just a few seconds and fill out that poll if you don't mind. And then we'll just hand it over to Pat. We want to know a few things about you. Awesome. Answers are coming in. Take another five or 7 seconds there. Right on. Okay, we've got some great answers there. And all right, Pat, I think we can just turn it over to you now.
Okay, thanks. I'm really excited for this session. We were trying to think as a group, what session do we kick everything off with? And I don't think there's any better way than to me, Phil, and Chris talk about data and what we're seeing out there. What we didn't want to do today is say, hey guys, solar's down year over year. I think we all know that. I think we all feel that. What we really want to do is dig in the data and look at some of those green shoots. What are some of the positive things we're seeing? What are some of the things the market is telling us? And again, what are some action items you guys could actually use to improve your business? So that's really where we're going to focus today. So Chris, if you want to just take it away on your slide, I think Phil and I will be annoying and poke and prod and ask some questions as you go. But hopefully we can set the stage of the solar landscape as we're jumping into all the webinars today.
Yeah, for sure. And so yeah, two things I wanted to focus on the positive side. One, at a micro level, what we're seeing certain installers, what they're doing to continue to grow. And then I think Phil's an expert on this, but what we're seeing at a macro level in terms of long-term fundamentals that'll help our industry. So there's, even during this period of slowdown, I think there's been a lot of positive momentum on the long-term fundamentals. So we can talk about that. I'll share my screen here and just go through a presentation. Can you all see that?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, great. I'll go full slideshow here for now. I do a quick disclosure. I think this is Phil for you. I don't know if you need to read it, but people can read it. So yeah, two things that we want to talk about. One, what we're seeing in terms of market green shoots, and then like at an installer level, what we're seeing, and try to learn a bit about what those installers are doing to outperform. And
Chris,
then
you might have a red box covering your main slide. I don't know, Phil, if you see that too. Yeah.
I do. Is that good?
Yeah, just get out of that next one. Yeah, there you go. Just want to make sure it wasn't blocking anything.
Okay, great. So real quick on the overall trends, What we've seen is some seasonality uptick. You saw 2023, you can see it right in the data there. It was flat. And what we're seeing through June is some nice seasonality. It's not quite where we would expect it to be in recent months, but it's a positive sign. So I think that's one green shoot is overall we are starting to see that recovery. And this is just at a state level for some of the large states. So these are sequential growth trends. Blue is growth and orange is declines. And in markets like Florida, Texas, that got hit really hard in 2023, we're starting to see that sequential growth. I think in June and July, it slowed down a little bit, but in general, it's headed in the right direction. That's the macro view. We could talk about this for hours, but wanted to go through some of what we're seeing at an installer level. And kind of, Pat, I think you and I can go back and forth on what you're seeing in Enerflow's customers as well.
Yeah.
But this is some data that the team put together. We looked at 5 large markets. These are the Sun Belt markets: Texas, Florida, and Arizona. And that bright blue bar with the red line is the market decline. So like in Texas, market's down 35%, Florida's down 33%, Arizona's 26%. But when you peel back the onion, the bars on the left are actual specific installers in their growth. So like in Texas, the market's down 35%, but you've got that one in the orange bar that's growing 100% year over year. And in Florida, you've got folks that are growing 25, 31, 200% year over year. And these are like medium-sized, large installers. These are not cherry-picked that you can see the megawatts installed there. And same thing for Arizona. So there are installers in these markets that are performing well. And those are some of the Sun Belt markets that got hit. There are some markets that are growing in the last year, like New Jersey and Nevada. And in those markets, Nevada's up 39%, New Jersey 25%, the Northeast has done better. There's installers that are really doing well, 200, 300% growth year over year in those markets.
Hey, Chris, can I jump in for a second? Unless Pat, you want to kick things off?
You're good.
Okay. So when you think about this contractor performance, and you're highlighting some are really performing well, and then clearly there are bankruptcies and others going out of business. Are you able to look at the whole universe and see what the bifurcation might be? What percentage of the contractors are doing well, and how well are they doing? I'm guessing maybe 30 to 40% are really doing well, and then the rest, it's some gradation of challenge. Have you looked at that kind of distribution of performance?
Yeah, I think that's right. What we tried to do is actually just dig even deeper and this is a chart that we put together we looked at almost every single one of those installers in that data and tried to look at some characteristics of what they were doing. And so we looked at a few things, like one, are they in multiple states? Are they expanding into states? Do they have a big percentage of lease previously, or have they successfully shifted? Do they work on a dealer model versus all vertically integrated? Do they have good installs, and have they been in the business for 5+ years? And I think looking at that, there were some common trends. Most of them were multi-state. I think the biggest thing was they had shifted successfully to leases and had made that adjustment, and they had good install timelines to stand out. Not all of them were the dealer model, but I think the ones that we've seen take share operate with that model where they've taken share from sales groups that have shifted over.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting trend here that we've seen as well. So I think we can probably talk about each one of these. From the multi-state side, as we looked at some data, one thing we saw is at the zip code level, some shrinkage where they're actually maybe installing in less zip codes than a prior 18 months. And I think as I've talked to dealers and we're having conversations, I think a lot of them are just focused on efficiency. And there's those zip codes where, maybe before they were willing to go into because some sales guy was promising some volume, but now they're really focusing to the zip codes where they know the AHJ process, they know they can be efficient, the utilities there, they can work well, maybe PTO goes faster. So I think that's one trend we've seen is people actually getting a little tighter with their markets, even if they are multi-state. And then that lease one, I'm not surprised at all to see checks across the board. I think that's an industry shift that's had to happen across everybody, we all had to get used to like, how do you sell a lease? How do you propose it? How do you talk about savings? Where people have been in this industry a long time, that's all we started with before it shifted to finance. So I'm really not surprised to see that one. On the dealer side, that's another interesting one where some of these guys who've been vertical forever, over the last 12 months, who just needed volume, they actually started their dealer models. And I probably saw this more and more. We're like, I know of an installer in Texas, also New Jersey, and they're like, hey, we're vertical, we know our thing, we train our guys, we're really good. And then as the market contracts a little bit, they have to think, okay, how can we get more volume? And so they've opened or started their dealer models where maybe before they weren't willing to do that. So that's another thing we've seen. On that install efficiency, how are you equating that one?
Yeah, so we have some interesting data on install timelines, like install and permitting timelines, to versus benchmark against specific AHJs that they operate in. It's a very clear measure, and yeah, I think almost all of them were above average in terms of efficiencies.
And that's going to help with cash flow, right? If you're installing faster in markets, you're under 60, 90 days, then you're going to have better cash flow, which keeps you healthier, which allows you to stay in business. That 5+ year one is interesting. And I wonder if you have any more subjective ideas on that. One thing I think of is some of these newer guys that we talk to, maybe they've been in business 1-2 years, they haven't been in business long enough to qualify for some of the bigger financiers. Right? And so they have a harder time diversifying, which is something we'll probably get into a little bit too. But yeah, I was just thinking that's an interesting one too, that some of these guys who have been for a while, they're still figuring out ways to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the lease column there, but I think Pat, you and I have talked about like another metric of diversification of financing providers, right? I think that's, yeah, as they've moved into leases, they've just added more financing providers to their options as well.
Yeah, we dug into our data before this, and one thing super interesting is if you go back about 18 months ago, on average, installers on our platform averaged about 2.5 financers that they work with, and now it's well over 3. In many cases, people are up to 5 or 7. And I've heard that talking to installers too, where they said, look, we've had to diversify. It creates operational overhead. It makes things more difficult. I've maybe had to hire a couple more staff to manage each financer's process, but it has allowed me to have more cash flow and have better control over how I diversify the funding of my job. So that is another one we've seen.
Yeah, I thought about adding a column here. One thing I did notice was a lot of these are actually Enerflo customers. To give you a flag, a lot of our Enerflo customers or guests on Phil's show. A couple of standouts that have done really well. Yeah, we didn't put any names up here, but I'm sure some people can guess which companies some of these are.
No, that's great. That's awesome insight.
Good. Well, what else? I don't know, Pat, what else would you mention? I think that's a core message that we try to deliver is, hey, the markets are down, but there are people that are doing well. Anything else to mention on tactics that you're seeing before I go on to some of the long-term stuff?
Yeah, obviously, I think some of this is mindset, right? People make a lot of money in down markets, right? Everyone talks about that. And the installers that are running efficiently, they're able to pick up volume from the guys going out of business. Those people still need installs. Those orphan jobs still need to get across the finish line. And so there is a lot of growth still that can be seen and we are seeing. And so I think that really is the more optimistic message, right? Like maybe as an industry we're down, but of course that covers some of the big publics and some of the other groups that drive a lot of volume. But I don't think that's quite the whole story at the local level. And I think some guys are doing great and maybe they don't want people to know they're doing great and get their secret out. But yeah, I think that's the overall message here.
Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was just the long term. So another reason to be positive is, and I feel you've probably got some good insights into this, but even though we've gone through this downturn, like some of the things that drive long-term fundamentals for distributed generation have actually improved over this time. We can talk about interest rates, a huge impact on the industry. Those are also, it'll take a little bit longer, but those are also going to be felt by utilities in their rate cases. And so they are not immune to that. The other things around the main drivers like electricity demand, infrastructure challenges that drive electricity costs, the need for more resiliency, consumer interest in electrification, those have all gotten better in the last year. And I wanted to just share some interesting data points out on that. This is some data that the team pulled on the Cal ISO peak load forecast. And they do a forecast every year. And the lowest one there is when they did it in 2018. And the highest one is when they did it in 2022. So every single year it gets higher, the expectations for electricity demand, and that drives wholesale rates up. The other thing that's changed, and I know, Phil, you've talked about this, that's changed relatively recently. Everybody knows that there's more data centers, but what's changed is the increase in AI. And so this is a chart from a research analyst just showing the impact of this new AI theme on data center demand, which will drive wholesale power rates.
Do you mind if I jump in and say a quick
Yeah,
word
you
on
got
that?
it, Phil. Yeah.
Maybe go to the prior slide. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
So for the past 6-7 months, a lot of people have been asking me, investors, hey, with this AI craze, where in the renewable segment do we see that benefiting? And a lot of people have been presuming utility scale solar. We have seen PPA prices go higher, but the problem with utility scale solar that we've been highlighting for the past 5-6 months is also that there are a substantial number of constraints there. So you mentioned that earlier, Chris. And so you have interconnection bottlenecks, permitting challenges, a long lead time, high voltage equipment taking a long time or extending. You have just a lot of challenges. So just because you layer on more demand doesn't mean that there's going to be incremental more supply coming online or capacity from a project standpoint. And so what I've been telling people for some time is I think the biggest beneficiary of this AI craze actually is resi solar. And the reason why is because it is just a driver of higher power prices over a long period of time. And resi solar is a quick turn business. And so what that means is continue to look for power prices to remain higher. And then you guys in the audience can benefit because you have the ability to sell against that. That's ultimately, I do see AI and data center being a benefit for especially the installers that operate in key regions where data centers are growing, and that would include the mid-Atlantic states and parts of the West.
I don't know if many people have made a connection that resi solar is a benefit of AI. So I think that's awesome you did that. So does that mean if I'm an installer, I should go install in markets where these data centers are being built? Is that what I should be looking at?
It just gives you more resilience with that power price. And so, for those installers already in the mid-Atlantic, for example, I think those guys can definitely benefit. It might be difficult to quickly pivot, but I do think you can make a long-term business case to say, let's go to where those data centers might be going as well.
That's super
interesting. And I think also there are outside data centers are one thing. There's many other factors outside of those markets that are going to drive utility rates. But this is just one interesting data point. We're not utility rate experts, but there was this headline about PJM capacity hitting record levels. This was from just a few weeks ago. So you're starting to see the signals of that early on. And then this is just a host of recent announcements on double-digit utility rates across the country.
And I think on that one too, I was doing some interesting stuff last week. If you look at the rate of inflation this year, utility rates surpassed inflation, and also other commodities did not grow as high as utilities did, like food and other things. And so I think that's one. And then I think there was a study, PG&E, they're saying by 2030, it could be up 40% from what we're seeing now. And I think there are some interesting discussions there, right? Where Phil, you were mentioning that resi solar guys can sell against those rate hikes. And I know there's a lot of pressure from installers wanting to show bigger kind of utility increases. There's this 4% max that is the compliance standard for lenders, but I think that might be something we have to look about with policy of maybe in certain regions, you should be allowed to show a customer more than 4% increase because that really is what they're feeling.
Or maybe the model can be a higher increase where you have visibility for the next 2 to 3 years, but then the model kind of reverts back to a lower level. You can take advantage of like the higher rate increases in the next 2 to 4 years.
Yeah, at least the ones that are published and we know are going to happen, highlighting those and then, maybe flattening out the assumptions later on.
From a software provider standpoint, that might be interesting where you can tap into the database with where the potential rate increases might be and then auto-populate for some of your customers there.
Yeah, it could be interesting. So back to get excited about solar. Utility rates are increasing and will keep increasing. So resi has an important piece to play there.
And then the other thing related to this is across the country, not just in those data center regions, but there's just a huge demand for resiliency. And this is just some data points here. This is from June 2024, of all the billion-dollar storms through June. And I think the average from 1980 to 2023 is 8.5. And this year it's already 15, or it's 15 over that same time period. So almost double. And I'll just give you some examples. I'm in Vermont, and I'm a participant in the VPP program through Green Mountain Power. We had our third power outage of the summer, record rain, and our power walls kicked in. And I know every single person in my neighborhood is now going to get power walls. There's huge demand for that. And this is just a chart that we love to show of all the VPP programs that are popping up. It's not just the rate increases, it's the demand for resiliency from utilities, but also consumers.
Yeah, this is one I don't think people talk enough about, is the VPP stuff that's happening. I guess it's one I don't know enough about, and I'm curious if you can add on some context of, are these usually driven by the utility? Are they driven by, is Tesla? I saw a partnership between Tesla and Sunrun running like a VPP program. Who's the main driver of those, and then how can resi installers take advantage of them?
Yeah, it's a mix. In some states, it's the utility that leads it. Green Mountain Power was, I think, the first VPP program in the country. But what you're seeing now is utility commissions kicking the utilities and requiring them to look into it. And so there's been some examples like that in Colorado, where there was legislation passed. Maryland, I think there's something called the Drive Act. So I think utilities are getting interested, but utility commissions are also forcing them to pay attention, because they're like, this is a way for you to save your customers money, to not have to pass on these huge rates. You have to look into this. So it's a combination. So I think that those are really positives in the long term. And this is all, I would boil it down to, rates are going up, and our costs for residential solar are hopefully going down. And those two things are not going to change. And so those are really positive things to focus on the long term. I just wanted to leave with your audience with a few takeaways from that. One is play the long game. Ohm Analytics is in this business for the long term, and I think installers should think the same way. We got to get through this rough patch. In terms of actual business tactics, like focus on those operational efficiencies, like you talked about, Pat, where you can install quickly and without a lot of risk. I stay ahead of the storage trends, right? You got the installers that I know that are doing well, are participating in those programs, or thinking about them, and then expand thoughtfully into new states. Know what you're getting into, know the competition, know the policy landscape in those states. And then one last call to action around supporting the industry. That's what I think you can do on your own business. But in terms of the overall industry, I know you've got a session on this with Julia and others, but stay ahead of the regulation and compliance component for your own business, but also get involved at a state level. And then get involved in policy around net metering and permitting and interconnect. Because if we really want to keep driving down costs, we got to stay ahead of the permitting and interconnect policies and tools at an AHJ level.
Definitely. Yeah, Phil, I know you interview different installers on your program, and you obviously look at companies like SunPower and Sunrun and stuff. Are there other things you're seeing that you think a lot of resi guys could make sure they're doing to stay healthy and in the game?
Let's see. I think Chris said some important things in that the business tactics slide. And so risk mitigation is super important. And then looking ahead, we are likely going to start to get some rate cuts, right? So that's a major relief valve that people can start to, I would say, don't count on it. And so just because the rates might be cut, you may not feel that benefit for now. So continue to be disciplined, mitigate risk, figure out that balance between risk and reward. And then at some point it flows through, and maybe you don't have to pass it all along to your customers, but ultimately that's an area of opportunity. It's more of something to look forward to, Pat, as opposed to something specific to do. But I think about the lessons of this down cycle for the next decade, right? Meaning we're going to get back to a free money time at some point again. And so think about that largesse and excess, and when people are just doing all kinds of crazy things to win business. When you get to that point in the cycle, remain disciplined, have that off-the-shelf kind of plan in case rates start to go up again or whatever. Just know what you're going to do. So just process this time to really establish your playbook for if you see these signs again of crazy, undisciplined behavior, how do you react and how do you act in that time to be positioned well for through the cycle as opposed to for that moment.
Yeah, I think that's really sound advice. Instead of thinking, hey, things will get better when this rate cut happens, right? Hopefully our message today shared with you that many installers are doing well. They're figuring out how to adapt in this market. And if you can figure it out in this market, as things get better, as things improve, you keep the discipline and learnings you were talking about, Phil, then really that's where the sky's the limit for a lot of these guys. So I think that's really good advice.
Phil, what are you hearing from investors? We both talked to a lot of investors. You talked to more, I think, but one thing we're thinking about is there's a lot of new capital providers coming in the market. And that is a huge positive. Despite this downturn, people still want to own these assets. And you share some positives there on what investors are saying about either the ones that are buying assets or public equities.
Yeah, you're talking about a number of two different types of investors, right? So
yeah.
Public equity investors are actually quite negative, at least the ones I talked to a variety of investors in solar. So utility scale solar just recently got some negative news from some of their stocks with guide downs for 24. But what we wrote on Sunday was we're 2 years into this downturn. This downturn is pretty mature, and Enphase is the key name as it relates to stocks to play that can jump to the upside. And so basically Enphase, the channel's clear, all these things are good. It's really about the rate of the slope and the rate of acceleration. Can that impress or surprise to the upside? And if that can, then you basically, as an investor, you can wait and take advantage of that, kind of buy the dip when Enphase goes down and just wait. The risk for Enphase is the Powerwall 3 and how that can take some share. Coming back to your original question here, Chris, there are a lot of private equity dollars and major multinationals ramping up lease offerings.
Yeah.
And so that brings a lot of validation to what Sunnova and Sunrun are doing, right?
Yep.
They wouldn't do that for free. They're doing that because they think they can not only make money, but generate a return on capital that is very attractive. And so with all these offerings out there, I would say keep one hand or foot in with an established player like a Sunrun or a Sunnova, but then explore with a LightReach, Everbright, others. There's Posigen, there's Service Finance Company. There are so many new ones ramping up. There's Enfin, and have some opportunity with those guys as well. So that's a bit of risk mitigation, if you will. We were talking to Freedom Forever CEO Brett Bushey just a month ago, and he philosophically a couple years ago was telling me, I only want one loan provider, one lease provider. He's in the world now where he has 3, maybe 4 lease providers, and he might add a 5th one, right? So he is diversifying because there's risk associated with just one lease company if they go under. And so just have a diversity of options. It might increase your cost of business, but you can live to fight another day if one of those guys goes down.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, well, that was great. That was good stuff. Thanks for putting that together. Thanks for your commentary. I think we're going to round it out with Chris, you showing some of your platform. I think as we asked that question in the beginning, how installers feel like data is important to them. I don't know that all of them really understand the access they could get through Ohm and how that could help them. So I think it'd be good if we show the audience real quick how your tool could help them with their data in their local markets and maybe find those areas of opportunity with permit turnaround times and some of the other trends we were talking about.
Yeah, sure. I can give a very quick preview. I'll try to focus on some of the things we talked about. One, just understanding what's going on in your market. And this is so you can go to any state in the country. And this is Florida as an example and see how the market in Florida is doing, but also just see how folks are stacking up. These are all the installers in Florida, and you can see how they're doing in terms of install days. And so there's some folks here that are much faster, and that's really good information to have to understand what your benchmark should be and who's growing or coming into the market. So some of the folks that were on that chart that we showed are here. You've got Equity and Lunix and some of these companies that are really growing. That is a very obvious thing to do, is just stay on top of your market. And then all those things I mentioned too about programs and the VPP programs and different incentives, that's available too. So we're tracking all of those. This is the Drive Act that I mentioned, which is responsible for the VPP programs. We have outlooks for each market. very detailed information on all these policies and programs. So staying ahead of those in your markets and other markets, super helpful. We have a lot more on reports. People love getting our monthly reports and just staying ahead of the market. There's some more tactical things that we're doing, Pat. Like we chatted about permitting and interconnect timelines, and I'll just show that briefly. We've launched a separate platform specifically for that called Clean Code. And so you can go, anywhere in the US and drill into a state and see every single AHJ there and what their permit timeline is. Right. Super helpful in knowing which jurisdictions to avoid. You've got a lot of, this is no secret, but you got a lot of red here in South Florida around some of these jurisdictions where it can take Hollywood City 72 days. So a ton of good data there. This is so good information for managing your business. Also something that we're trying to push for the industry too. We have a number of folks that are using this data to go talk to mayors and governors about getting automated permitting and making changes either at an AHJ or utility level. So
yeah, that's one of the most frustrating things, right? Where the utility or AHJ aren't cooperating and really trying to help with timelines. Technically, utilities and AHJs, they could go slow on purpose just to squeeze installers' cash flow. It's really a game that can be played here. So I think that's really great when it's actually being used to improve policy.
Absolutely, yeah. We have groups like Permit Power or Solar App or Solar United Neighbors that partner with us to use this data. They're taking this exact dashboard and for case studies and those discussions to really make the point about why there needs to be change. A call to action for anybody on the phone, installers. You can get access to a lot of this information. We have a data partnership program. We'll make sure that link gets sent out, or you can just go to our main website and learn more about that. But a lot of this you can get in exchange for participating in those programs, and it helps your business, but also helps the industry a lot too.
Yeah, that's great. I think it goes back to what we were talking about with discipline, like market planning. There are times 18 months ago, 12 months ago, I'm talking to installers like, yeah, I'm going to open this market because I got this huge sales group and they promised me all this volume. And it's okay, but have you done the planning? Have you seen what competition looks like? Have you seen what turnaround times with permitting offices are? And so like even just have the discipline of expansion and doing it right with data could make a huge difference for people and how they expand.
Yeah, I know a very large EPC in California that has moved to a couple other, like Texas, a couple other markets, and they're using that data, right? They're sharing that with their sales teams in some of those large metro markets to plan where they go.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And thanks again, guys, for joining. Any final words before we wrap this one up?
No, this is a great way to kick it off. I'll be listening into the other panels. It's a lot of really great people that you guys have pulled together.
Awesome.
So
yeah, Brent, you want to give everybody a quick just rundown of what session's next and what to expect for the day?
Yeah. The next one, so everything will start at the top of the hour throughout the day for the next 2 days. And our next one is Financing the Future, Financial Perspectives in the Solar Industry. So it's going to be great.
That is a stacked panel.
Yeah, it is. It's a good panel.
It'll be a really great one. Yeah, with our format, we're trying to end a few minutes early each time, give you guys time to bio break, make some phone calls, close some deals, and then hop back on. So we'll see you guys all in about 12 minutes as we kick off the next one. But thanks again, Phil and Chris, for joining. Appreciate the insight and definitely gets me optimistic for the industry and for the rest of the day.
Awesome.